My grandmother always said that the people who smile the widest at a funeral are the ones who already know what's in the will. I thought she was being cynical. I was wrong. Her name was Lorraine, and she raised me in the house on Maple Ridge Road in Ancaster, Ontario. A two-story red brick with a wraparound porch, a maple tree so old it had lifted the front walkway in 3 places, and a kitchen that always smelled of butter and Radio Canada playing low in the background. She was my mother's mother, and she was, in every way that mattered, the steadiest person I have ever known. I'm 32 now. I work as a registered dental hygienist in Hamilton. My life is quiet by design. Early mornings, methodical work, patients who are nervous and need steadiness back. I like routine. I like knowing what comes next. That steadiness is something I learned from my grandmother, and it is the only reason I got through what happened after she died. She passed in March, on a Thursday, 3 days after her 81st birthday. The winter had been hard on her. She'd been slowing down since Christmas, and though I visited every Sunday without fail, driving out to Ancaster, making lunch, sitting with her while she watched her programs, I think part of me still believed she had more time. She was so present, even near the end, sharp-eyed. Funny, in that dry, unhurried way she had, she called the news channel the Panic Theater. She remembered my patients' names from one week to the next. She felt permanent, and then she wasn't. The call came from my aunt on the maternal side. Her voice was careful, practiced. She was the kind of person who modulated everything. She told me that Grandma had gone quietly, in her sleep, which is the only mercy I could hold on to in those first hours. I sat down on the kitchen floor of my apartment and stayed there for a long time. No particular reason to be on the floor. I just couldn't find a reason to be anywhere else. What I didn't know then, sitting on that tile, was that my grandmother had been thinking about me for a long time. Not just in the soft, fond way of someone who loves you. In a deliberate, practical, forward-looking way. In the way of someone who knew exactly what her other family members were capable of and had quietly made sure they couldn't touch what she meant to leave behind. I found that out 2 weeks later, sitting across from her estate lawyer in a building on King Street West, in a room with good light and a view of the escarpment. His name was Mr. Beaumont, and he had the kind of calm authority that doesn't need to announce itself. He handed me a glass of water before he even introduced himself, and something about that small courtesy nearly undid me. He explained the will clearly. My grandmother's estate included some savings, some GCs, and the house on Maple Ridge Road. She had left the savings to be divided among her children, with my mother receiving the largest portion. The house, however, was different. The house she had left entirely to me. My grandmother had bought that house with my late grandfather in 1971. They'd raised 3 children in it. She had lived in it alone for the 20 years since he passed. It was assessed by the city of Hamilton at just over $800,000. In the current market, Mr. Beaumont told me gently, it would likely go for considerably more than that. Properties in that neighborhood, that size, that condition. The number he mentioned made me grip the armrest. He said something else too. Something that felt odd at the time, though it wouldn't for long. He said my grandmother had been very clear about her intentions. She had updated the will 14 months prior. She had done so with full legal capacity, independently, with a different lawyer than the one who had handled her affairs for years, specifically to ensure the update could not be challenged on the grounds of undue influence. She had also left a sealed letter with Mr. Beaumont to be given to me at my discretion if I felt I needed it. I didn't understand why she would take those precautions. Not yet. My mother and her brother were present for the reading. My mother sat beside me, and I noticed she didn't reach for my hand. She had a notebook, which I thought was strange, bringing a notebook to your own mother's will reading, and she kept turning her pen over and over between her fingers. Her brother sat across from us, arms crossed, saying nothing. He'd driven up from Brantford, and he looked like a man who had already calculated his route home based on how long this would take. When Mr. Beaumont read the section about the house, my mother went very still. That's the only way I can describe it. She didn't gasp, didn't react visibly. She just stopped moving. And then she wrote something in her notebook and closed it. On the drive home, she called me. I was still in the parking garage, hadn't even started the engine. She wanted to come over, to talk, to help me process everything. I said yes because I didn't yet understand that the conversation she wanted to have had nothing to do with grief. She and her brother came together, which should have been my first sign. They sat at my kitchen table with the kind of coordinated energy that told me they'd already spoken before they arrived. My mother made the tea herself, moving around my kitchen with proprietorial ease, and set the mugs down before beginning. She started gently. She said that it was a lot to manage a house like that for one person at my age with my income. She said property taxes in Ancaster were significant. She said maintenance on a house that old, the roof, the furnace, the foundation, added up quickly. She said she was only thinking of me. My uncle was less gentle. He said that Grandma, God love her, had made a sentimental decision, and that sentimentality wasn't always practical. He said the house should stay in the family, meaning in their control. He said the fair thing, and he used that word, fair, with real conviction, would be to sell the property and divide the proceeds the way they ought to have been divided in the first place. What they meant was, sell the house, put the money through their hands, and see how much of it found its way back to me. I didn't say any of that out loud. I said I needed time to think. That was enough to buy me 2 weeks, but I could see it in the way my mother looked at me when she left. That patient, calculating look that meant she'd already decided how this would end and was simply waiting for me to catch up to her version of events. I'd seen that look my whole life. It was the look that came before she registered me in activities I hadn't chosen, before she forwarded my resume to her friends without asking, before she told people things about my life that I'd shared in confidence. She always framed it as love. It always felt like being managed. I went to see Mr. Beaumont again the following Monday. I told him what my mother and uncle had said. I told him about the look on her face during the reading. I told him I was worried. He listened with that same unhurried calm, and then he asked me if I wanted to know what my grandmother had actually anticipated. He opened the file and showed me something I didn't know existed. 3 months before she died, while she still had full capacity and full independence, my grandmother had worked with a separate legal team to explore protective options for the property. Mr. Beaumont's had those notes. She had asked point questions about what it would take for a family member to contest the will. She had asked about the grounds on which a transfer of property could be challenged. And then she had asked what options existed to make a property essentially untouchable by anyone other than the named beneficiary. She had done the research herself. She had brought in her doctor to provide a capacity assessment, unprompted. She had also, quietly, asked a family friend she trusted to witness a short video recording, just her, sitting at her kitchen table, saying clearly and calmly who she was, what she understood herself to be signing, and why. She said she was leaving me the house because she believed I would care for it, and because she'd seen, over the years, what her own children valued and what they didn't. Watching her later, on Mr. Beaumont's laptop screen, I had to press my hand flat against the desk to keep myself composed. She was wearing the blue cardigan she always wore. She looked tired, but she was entirely herself, entirely certain. Mr. Beaumont explained the next step. The house could be transferred directly into a trust structured around my name, a vehicle that would hold the property as a legal entity, with me as sole trustee and beneficiary. Once inside the trust, the property could not be sold, transferred, or leveraged by anyone without my explicit authorization as trustee. It would be shielded from any claim that rested on a personal transfer to Ava. Because Ava the person wouldn't be the title holder anymore. The trust would be. And the trust had one beneficiary. We filed the paperwork within days of my inheritance being formalized. The deed transferred from my grandmother's estate to me, and then immediately from me to the trust. It was registered with the land registry. It was done before my mother had arranged her second visit. I kept that to myself. My grandmother had said, don't argue, in her way. Let them think they're winning. So I let them think they were winning. The second visit was worse than the first. My mother came alone this time, which was somehow more exhausting. Her alone, at her most persuasive, with that particular brand of pressure that wraps itself in the language of concern. She brought a printed sheet from a real estate website. She circled figures with a pen. She pointed out what comparable properties had sold for, what the commission would be, what the net proceeds would look like split 3 ways between her, her brother, and me. 3 ways, as though the whistle said anything about her brother at all. I asked her why the house was hers to negotiate. She said that Grandma's intentions would have been different if she'd had better advice. She said the decision had been made in isolation, she said, and this is the part that sat in my chest for days afterward. She said that I had always been Grandma's favorite, that I had taken advantage of that closeness, and that the rest of the family deserved to be considered. I had taken advantage of it. The closeness I'd built by showing up, by calling, by learning to bake butter tarts from scratch because my grandmother wanted someone to learn. The closeness I'd built by sitting with her through 2 hip recoveries and a bad winter when she'd been too proud to ask for help but too frail to manage alone. That closeness. I didn't argue. I said I was still thinking. She left with the satisfied air of someone who considers thinking a temporary obstacle. My uncle's move came 11 days later. I was at work, between patients, when my phone showed a number I didn't recognize. The woman on the line introduced herself as an assistant at a law office in Burlington. She said she was calling on behalf of my uncle, who was pursuing a claim under Ontario's Succession Law Reform Act, on the grounds that my grandmother had been subject to undue influence at the time the will was amended. She asked if I had legal representation. I said yes. I called Mr. Beaumont before I'd even gotten back to my operatory. He was not surprised. He said they would have the capacity assessment, the video, and the independent legal opinion from the second lawyer who had advised my grandmother. He said the undue influence argument was particularly fragile given that she had sought out a different lawyer specifically to avoid any appearance of partiality. He said they should proceed. And then he said something I've thought about many times since. He said my grandmother was a very thorough woman. He said she had understood what her family might do, and she had made it nearly impossible for them to do it. He said the most loving thing she had done for me was not leave me the house. It was leave me the means to keep it. The legal process moved steadily. My uncle's lawyers sent a letter outlining their claim. Mr. Beaumont responded with the full documentation package, capacity assessment, witness statement, video recording, chronology of the will amendment, record of independent counsel. He also noted, pointedly, that the property in question had already been transferred to a trust prior to any contestation, meaning any challenge to the personal transfer was moot in practical terms. You can argue over a title that no longer exists in the form you're arguing about, but you won't get very far. It took 3 weeks for the response to arrive. The claim was being withdrawn. I read the letter twice. I set it on my kitchen table. I made a cup of tea. I sat with it for a while. My mother called that evening. She didn't mention the withdrawal directly. She asked how I was doing, in the careful, probing way of someone trying to assess how much I already knew. I said I was fine. I asked how she was. She said fine. There was a pause that went on longer than it should have, and then she said she'd been thinking that perhaps we should talk. I said I'd been thinking the same thing. We met the following Saturday at a coffee shop in the East End. Neutral territory, her suggestion. She arrived looking polished and a little tired, and she sat down across from me and ordered an Americano. And for a moment she just looked at me like she was trying to find the version of me she knew how to manage. I spoke first. I told her that I knew what they'd tried to do. I told her I wasn't angry, which was only partly true. I told her that Grandma had known too, which I could see landed differently than she expected. I watched something move across my mother's face. Not guilt exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something that understood it had been caught not by me, but by a woman who was no longer alive to hear the apology. She said that they'd been trying to look out for the family. She said they'd been worried about me taking on too much. She said that it was complicated, having a mother leave something to a grandchild rather than her own children, that it raised questions. I said that Grandma had answered those questions herself. On video. With a lawyer present, 14 months before she died, my mother wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said she supposed that was that. I said that it was. I also said that I needed her to understand something. I told her that I knew she thought of it as a financial disagreement, a family negotiation, something reasonable people could dispute. But what they had done, retaining counsel to contest the documented, witnessed, independently verified wishes of an 80-year-old woman who had gone out of her way to make her intentions clear. That wasn't a negotiation. That was something else. And I needed her to know that I knew it. She didn't argue. That surprised me more than anything. She said she was sorry. I don't know how much of it she meant. I think she meant some of it. I think she understood that she had lost something she couldn't get back through any legal mechanism. Not access to the house, but access to me as a person who would let things slide. That version of me was gone. We finished our coffees. We talked about other things, briefly and stiffly. She hugged me when we left, and I let her, and we both knew that something was different now. The shape of the thing had changed. I drove to Ancaster afterward. It had been 6 weeks since I'd been inside the house, and walking in through the side door, the one with the finicky latch that you have to lift and push at the same time, felt like stepping into something that still held her. The light through the kitchen windows was the same. The maple tree was just starting to bud. The lifted section of front walkway was still lifted. I'd meant to ask about getting it fixed, and then I'd meant to ask again, and now there was no one to call before calling a contractor. I sat in her chair by the window, the one angled toward the back garden, and I was quiet for a long time. Grandma had known. She had sat in this house, in this chair probably, and she had thought it through, and she had made phone calls and appointments and decisions that would outlast her. She had done it without telling me, because telling me would have meant telling me she was scared and she was too proud for that and also too practical. What she felt didn't help me. What she did. I have been living in the house for 4 months now. I made the drive permanent in July. Rented out my apartment, transferred my patient roster to a clinic in Ancaster, learned the names of the neighbors. I fixed the walkway. I haven't changed much else. The kitchen is still the same shade of cream it's always been. The butter tarts I make never come out quite like hers, but I make them anyway. My mother and I talk occasionally. It's different, and I think we both know it will stay different. My uncle I haven't spoken to since the letter of withdrawal. That chapter is closed in the quiet, administrative way of things that simply run out of road. What I think about most, on the mornings when the light comes in sideways through the kitchen windows and the kettle is on and the maple tree is doing whatever the maple tree is doing outside, is this. My grandmother didn't protect the house to give me a financial asset. She protected it to give me a home. She understood the difference, and she understood it about me specifically because she'd paid attention for 32 years. The most powerful thing a person can cleave you isn't property. It's evidence that someone saw exactly who you were, decided you were worth protecting, and then did the quiet, painstaking work to make sure that when they were gone, that protection held. I am still learning how to live inside that kind of love. I think I'll be learning for a long time.